This is Take a Cue, Season 2, Episode 10. 1,
2, 3, 4.
Welcome to Season 2 of Take a Cue. I'm Erik Donough, 8th grade band and jazz band director.
And I'm Jen Wise, 4th and 5th grade instrumental music teacher.
We are two veteran educators with over 35 years of experience teaching music in New Jersey public schools between the two of us, and we're excited to bring teaching experiences and insights to you.
So excited! Whether you're just starting out in your teaching career or you've been teaching longer than we have, this show will help you grow with new ideas and perspectives about music education and teaching.
We hope you'll be just as inspired as we are every time you listen. Before we begin, if you enjoy our podcast, please help us out by doing a few super easy things.
First, subscribe on your favorite podcast app.
Then make sure you rate the podcast and leave a review.
It helps people find our show who haven't yet, and we really appreciate it.
If you find that you get a lot out of our episodes, we'd be grateful if you considered becoming a monthly supporter to help us grow the podcast.
You can sign up to make a secure monthly payment using the link in our show notes or on our Spotify for Podcasters site.
Also, if you have questions or comments about anything you hear in the episode, come and interact with us on social media or Take a Cue Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Oh.
It's Oboe Day, Jen.
I'm so excited for Oboe Day. I'm so excited to get my mind blown about the oboe because I could use some help. I feel like we could all use some help with starting out our oboists.
Yes,
yeah.
It is one of those things like, it's out there. You want to do it, and still at the same time, it's definitely a very unique animal. Yeah. Our episode today was an awesome chat with Meredyth Coleman, a professional oboist and teacher here in northern New Jersey, and I learned a lot.
Oh, I did too, and I'm so excited for you all to get these great takeaways from her about teaching oboe. And if you're wondering why your oboists sound like ducks, she's going to tell you, and she's going to make you feel okay about it. And I love that. So that's right. This is so good. I'm so excited we all get to share this today. So
yes, Meredyth had some great tips about how to put the instrument together, what to do with your reeds, what type of reeds she recommends, and what type of instruments she recommends, how to get kids breathing correctly, holding the instrument correctly, working on tone production, working on hand position, and we also asked her some slightly more advanced questions. I suppose, maybe the second month lessons, perhaps, that some of these ideas could go, could help with.
Yeah. So here we go. Let's hear it from Meredyth. Welcome, Meredyth. We're so excited to have you today. Thank you so much for being here on Take a Cue to talk oboe with us. This is great.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, this is so good. So, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and your experience with oboe and teaching? And
Sure. So I have been a musician for most of my life. And I'll tell you how I started because that kind of helps tell and explain how I got to oboe. My mother, I had a wonderful mother who exposed me to all these things. And when I was 22 months old, I started Suzuki violin. And I played violin for many, many, many years. And then the district where I went to school in Lee Summit, Missouri, started band at 5th grade. And I wanted to play an instrument that nobody else played because I was always in this large sea of violins. And so my mother helped me research. This was way before Google, and found that no one really played the oboe. So I went to my band teacher and said I wanted to play the oboe. And he said he thought he had one in the closet, tucked away with dust, cobwebs, everything. So he went and got it, and I honked my way through my first year. And actually, I didn't have a teacher until 8th grade, a private teacher. So I played for a couple of years just on my own and stuck with it. I actually would not recommend doing that, but that's how it was back in the days. And so that's how I got to oboe. So I started oboe when I was 10. So I've been playing oboe for a very long time. And I always say I really started to play the oboe the summer before my 9th grade year, because that is when I found my first real oboe teacher. I had one prior that was okay. Meredyth Coleman was her name. She was the principal of the Kansas City Symphony. She is now principal of the LA Phil. She's amazing. She's been at the LA Phil for years. She left and went to LA when I left to go to college. So she was what I call my first real teacher. Wonderful teacher, and turned me really into an oboe player. And I actually started teaching some students when I was a junior in high school. So I've actually been teaching even private students for a very long time. And I played in 3 orchestras when I was in high school, and one of them was a professional orchestra called the Northland Symphony. I was associate principal. So I was big into orchestra when I was in high school. And then I went to the University of Illinois for my undergrad, big music school, and also did orchestra there. The main orchestra is split twice each year into smaller groups, a chamber orchestra and an opera orchestra. And I found I really loved that even more, and really was kind of, gravitating towards the smaller groups. Then I went to the Hart School of Music for my master's and studied with Bert Lucarelli, who was probably the greatest oboe teacher to live. Unfortunately, he passed away in August. I also worked with Ronnie Roseman, who was a wonderful teacher and oboist. And then after my master's, I went to the Mannes College of Music in New York City and did a degree on English horn with Tom Stacy. While I was at the Hart School, I also was taking with Tom Stacy on English horn. So I actually worked with him for 4 years.
I didn't know you could do a single degree just on English horn.
Yes, that was the only place you could do it. So I got to do that degree with him, and he unfortunately passed away last May. We're losing a lot of our wonderful legends in the oboe world, just because they, have reached a very an older age. So that's kind of my background. I moved to this area when I went to the Hart School. I was in Connecticut, and then when I was at Mannes, my second year I lived in New Jersey. So that's where I kind of landed, was in New Jersey. So I've been here for 22 years. My husband, Erik Donough, is also is a flute player, an amazing flute player, and he and I met at Mannes, and that's where we formed our trios. Okay. While we were still in school. So I am a chamber musician. And that love of the smaller groups at Illinois kind of started showing me that. And then the Hart School was such a small school. Chamber music was really critical there. And I loved it. So I've been in New Jersey for, as I said, 22 years. I've always had a pretty large oboe studio. Sometimes it becomes too large, but that's okay. I make it work. So that's me, I guess, in a nutshell. I perform all the time, and I think that helps me be a great private teacher as well. Because, when my students have their performances and their auditions, I can speak with them about what I've gone through and what's happened with me in those. And I explain to them, look, you just have to do them. They're very odd things. Auditions are very odd things. Performing is fun, and you just kind of have to go through them and to see what they're about. So I think that it is very beneficial for them that I perform all the time, at least, 2 or 3 times a week. Last week I had, I think, 5 performances. So
it was a light week.
It was a light week.
And full disclosure, Jen, Meredyth is also Maggie's oboe teacher.
Yes,
so I get to hear all the fruits of both of their labors every week, great. Which is awesome.
That's so cool. I've heard great things about their recitals with you, and some of my students study with you as well. So that is so cool. So we'll have to have that conversation after. But that's so great. We're so lucky to have you here in North Jersey, and we have a lot to talk about, because I know as soon as I get my oboist to a certain point, I'm like, exactly like you said, time for a private teacher.
Yeah.
Let's get to the next step. You need to study with an oboist. So we're happy to have that expertise today. So where should we start before they get to you? What should we do in those first lessons to give our kids the best setup and the best start?
Sure. I personally think the best setup to start with is obviously the materials. I know it can be difficult, but the only beginner oboe I would recommend is the Yamaha. And I am not sponsored by Yamaha. There are so many makers of instruments now, especially cheap instruments. And I don't have a lot of experience with other instruments, but I know for the oboes, the materials are just very junky. And, beginner kids, they're usually on the younger side. They're not very careful. And those oboes can just go out of adjustment all the time. And if they're even working properly in the beginning. So a lot of times when kids are starting, the oboe's not even working properly. And then they think it's them. And it's already a struggle. So the Yamaha 211, and now it's the 241. The intermediate's the 441. So the beginner is the 241. That's the beginner oboe I recommend because the pitch scale is also good. A lot of the cheaper instruments you may not have heard of, the pitch scale can be very, very off. So that's the oboe I recommend when you're first starting. Okay. And then the other thing is the reeds. It's very important. Unfortunately, with oboe reeds right now, even the machine ones have become very expensive. So it's a struggle, when you're a beginner oboist because you can break reeds. I know this is a little controversial, but I really do not recommend the plastic reeds. And there's a couple of reasons why. I understand why people recommend them because they are pretty indestructible. The problem with the plastic reeds is they're actually a little bit wider. So your embouchure can't be, correct. And the sound is, I find, terrible. And the pitch can also be a little off. And there's nothing you can do to fix them. So I don't really recommend the plastic reeds. I would recommend more having them be on a good machine-made reed, and I'll tell you which brands I recommend. And just, they might break a couple, but usually, to be honest, they stop breaking them pretty quickly. Because that's something we talk about as well, is how to care for your reed, how to be careful with your reed. So that's something you can speak with them about as well. But
I did notice, as far as the prices, it's actually kind of a good thing. It has been for me that like even Jones reeds are like $18 a reed now, because I go to my kids in 8th grade and I say, look, you can spend $18 on a Jones reed, or you can spend $18 on this handmade reed. Why don't you go buy these handmade reeds instead? And they're like, oh, okay, sure. So now I think every kid is playing on handmade reeds, all 6 of my oboists in 8th grade, which has never happened before.
Right.
I know. The machine-made reeds, you used to be able to buy an emerald reed for $6. So that gap was much bigger. So I used to recommend the emerald reed first, get an emerald medium soft. And then when they got like pretty good about that reed, then go up to the Marlin Lesher. That's the next machine-made reed I recommend. They usually come pretty consistent. They usually come not leaking and somewhat in tune. Then from then on, then you go on to a handmade reed. And you have to find one. My friend, Alyssa, who Maggie orders from, and all my students,
I order from her too now.
Yep. Doublereedgirl.com. Now, her reeds are abnormally a little bit in the lower price range. A lot of handmade reeds are in the $35, $40 range, but hers are more affordable and they're good. They're pretty consistently good, to be quite honest, because that's also a struggle. So that's what I recommend is starting on emerald, medium soft reed. Soft is usually too soft and medium is usually too hard. And then go to the Marlin Lesher, medium soft. And then you go to like doublereedgirl.com, her handmade reed, the standard reed.
Yeah,
now, one thing, I have had a couple of, I just want to say one more thing about reeds, because I've had a couple of students come to me with medium hard. and hard reeds. I think there's a misconception that the stronger the student's getting, the harder the reed they play on. And that's actually not true. I actually play on very easy, flexible reeds because I need to be able to do a lot with them. So really, nobody should be above a medium, soft, or medium. Nobody should be.
They've got the instrument. They've got the Yamaha.
Yes.
They've got the emerald reed or several emerald reeds.
That's right.
In those plastic tubes. And they're coming in for their first lesson. And so what is that?
So the first thing I recommend is just starting with the reed and getting their embouchure set. Because the embouchure for oboe, to be honest, it's not that tricky. And if you explain it in detail, and it's not even going to take that long, I think they really get it. And then your job is just to kind of watch it in the first about month. Just keep reminding them of the things. Usually what I have everybody do is we talk about, so there's a lower lip, upper lip, and your corners. Those are the three things. And the corners, a really good way to show where they go is to have people try to whistle. And they don't actually have to whistle, but pretend like they're going to whistle. Because your corners go right where they need to go. And even your upper lip is kind of where it needs to be. So then what I have them do is they put the reed halfway up their lower lip. Okay, and I tell them to glue it to it. Not to
Meredyth, I'm just going to pause. I'm just going to stop you right here for 1 sec. Listeners, if you're listening on like Spotify or your favorite podcast app, you may want to stop and head on over to YouTube because Meredyth is demonstrating here and definitely want to see what she's doing.
So you want to put your reed on your lower lip and you glue it to it. That's what I tell them. And then they're going to roll their lower lip in. And as they do that, those corners need to come in like a whistle. You can also have them try to do fish face. Another really good trick, you have to tell them to be very careful, but even if they break the reed, it's kind of worth it, is have them turn the reed the wrong way, so vertically, and you have them put it here, roll it in, because that gets their corners right where it needs to go, and have them pretend to blow, and then they turn it the right way, and then they blow. So these are 3 tricks. So you can, the whistle, the fish face, and turning the reed vertically. Now, upper lip. If you tell a young child to just bring their upper lip down, they will tuck it just the right amount. That's kind of a mistake that a lot of people make. But I've taught thousands of young children how to play the oboe. And I finally even started realizing several years ago, if I just say, bring your upper lip down, they literally, because they naturally tuck it a little bit. But if you tell them to tuck their upper lip, you get the whole tuck. And then we end up with a smile, which you don't want. So that's a good way to explain the embouchure. So have them all, I would try the whistle first, whistling, and then just glue it halfway up their lip. And as they roll in, literally corners in, upper lip just comes down. Okay. Now breathing, I actually start talking about breathing right at the beginning. So I don't know if you want me to mention that.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
this is kind of like, this is,
Okay.
we want to know what it's like
Sure.
having a beginning lesson from you.
Because I do it right in the beginning. And they may not grasp and understand all of this at once, but these are things you talk about for the next 3 or 4 or 5, 6 weeks in a row. So the breathing, as they're putting it on their lower lip and they're rolling their lip in, you want to tell them to take a breath through their toes above the reed. And it needs to be silent. And then once they feel like they've taken that breath, then they need to support like they're going to the bathroom. Tighten that muscle and just push it in. Like you tighten it like this. And I originally explained it as a water balloon because most 4th and 5th graders have held a water balloon. So we talk about a water balloon fills up from the bottom up and then you tie it off. So that's your breathing. That's your air intake is that water filling up. Then you tie it off. And if I were to squeeze the bottom of that water balloon, what would happen? And I remind them it's tied. And so they don't say it pops. The water all goes out. So the water all goes up and it creates this pressure. And that's how we play the oboe. So I usually talk about the water balloon. Then I show them the embouchure. And we start with crowing first. And I know you had a question about crowing. So we start with the crow. And that's a good way for them to practice their embouchure and taking that deep breath. And then they crow. So there was a question about the crow. Do you want me to go out and answer that?
Sure. My question was like, where do they put their lips in order to get the crow? Because I've heard two different schools of thought, and one of those, I'm sure you've heard them both, and one of those is all the way into the string, and the other one is just where you would play the reed normally. So, what do you recommend?
I do it where you would play the reed normally. Yes, in this country, in America, there are two big schools of how to play the oboe, and they're quite opposite from each other. And there are some things that are similar, but there are a lot of things that are very opposite. So you will hear two very separate ways on how to play the oboe. So I do it as if you were playing. And the crow, the crow does tell us a decent amount of the reed of what's going on. I use it, to be honest, more for just seeing if the reed's vibrating and if it's going to work in the way I think it's going to. For a young child, they're not going to really know much about what to do with a crow, and I wouldn't really focus too much on the crow. It would be more to tell them if their reed is working.
Okay.
I wouldn't go too in depth with the crow. I would start with, is it working? Because if you blow or nothing's coming out, that's going to tell you either the reed's broken or they're clamping down on the reed. Because if you clamp on with your mouth on the reed, then your sound's not going to come out. And you just remind them we have to create the whistle because we're trying to create an oval with your embouchure. And then you could talk about pitch with the crow to see if the pitch is sitting. I usually crow my reeds at a B. Some people now are crowing at C. It's tending to creep up. But if it crows really, really flat, the reeds might be kind of flat if they're blowing properly. But it is good to start them with just crowing first before you put the reed into the oboe. That way they can practice the breathing and the embouchure.
Well, I'm kind of curious. What if, you have a kid and you said, it's to make sure the reed's working. What if the reed's not? They've soaked the reed, they've putting it in their mouth. Either they're blowing air through and it's far too open, or they can't get any air through at all because it's too closed. Do you worry about, is that something that usually happens during the first lesson, or is that something that doesn't usually, isn't something that is usually worried about at that point?
If you get one of those two brands of reeds, it's probably going to be okay. And that's one reason why I like the emeralds first, because they tend to be not too open. And if a reed is too open, you have to be a little careful when they're young. But you can make sure it's wet, and you can hold the very tip closed. You don't smash it; you just gently hold it closed, and that will help the reed play a little bit more true to itself. Because when they get to the handmade reeds, Alyssa's are usually pretty good. They usually come with a decent opening. But I would rather deal with a reed that's too open than a reed that's very closed. A reed that's very closed is a little bit harder to fix. You can soak it in warm water for a good 5 to 7 minutes. That will help. Some people like to open them with pliers. I think you have to be a little careful with that because you can. I don't do that. But I know I've heard people doing that because you can open them way too much and then they're destroyed.
Yeah.
Okay, but I wouldn't tell children to do that. That would just
I'm gonna stay away from the pliers with the kids.
See, people do it.
Yeah.
There was one question I do want to address. The first one: should you be started on oboe or on another instrument? And I just want to address this because where I grew up, you started on whatever instrument you wanted to start on. You weren't transferred, and so when I came to New Jersey, I kept getting all these 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th graders that were coming from other instruments. So I had to quickly learn what the typical problems were going to be when someone came from flute, what the typical problems were going to be when someone came from clarinet or came from saxophone. It tended to be those three. And now, again, not everybody who came from flute had the same problems, but there were similar problems I kept seeing showing up. I personally think you should start kids on oboe. All of my students that have started on oboe, I don't have to undo anything. We just start and it's like fresh and we just go. Okay. And, Erik's daughter is proof of that. And I have one of my seniors start as a 4th grader on oboe. And as long as they can reach the keys and they have the patience and they have everything working, I think they can start on the oboe.
Yeah, all six of my...
In fact, I prefer it, actually.
Yeah, all six of my oboists all have played since fourth grade, and they're all doing very well.
Great. No,
I was
that's
going to
great.
say in fourth grade's okay.
Completely. Yeah, as long as they're big enough to reach. I wouldn't do anything younger than third grade, but as long as they're able to reach the keys, it's okay.
Cool.
Because they're going to be on easy reeds anyway. There's no problem with reeds being too hard.
Yeah.
So we've got the reed. They're making a nice sound. They've got everything working. Then what?
We put it into the oboe. First, I always show them how to put the oboe together. And what I recommend is the bell and what we call the middle joint go on first. And I recommend putting it on a little bit, and then we grab where there are no keys hanging off the side, none of our pinky keys. And then we use our hip and we push it on. Kind of put it like that. Then the top, because the tricky thing with oboe are these connector keys. And they can get where they are like this and kids are pushing and then they get bent. And then the A flat, there's a little A flat bent key right here that can get bent, and the pad can get a little scraped if they're not careful, if they're doing a lot of like big twisting. So I always recommend lining it up. Let me show you like this, and then pushing it on like this from the top. Okay. And so we talk about that, how you need to put your oboe together. And then at the end, we talk about how to take the oboe apart. So
now, we've had a couple woodwind episodes here, and the teachers have said that they'll go through the oboes ahead of time, the new oboes, and make sure that all the corks are greased and everything like that. Agreed?
Smart.
Yeah.
And if you can make any kind of noise on the oboe, I would try them as well. Because a lot of times from the shops, they're coming, they're not working. I had somebody go to pick up a new Yamaha that was sent to the store for them. And I always tell my students, take your reeds, try it at the store. They listened, they did that, and the oboe didn't work. So otherwise they go home. The next day they try the oboe, it doesn't work, and now we're in the same situation. So that's smart. Put the cork grease, yes. And if the corks are very tight, then you can show them how to do that as well. Okay. So what do we do first? Right? Put the reed in. I always talk with them about once the reed is in, and they're looking at their hands, be careful because they like to sometimes they can, hit their shoulder with the reed. First, we talk about how left hand goes on the top, right hand goes on the bottom, and I check where their thumb is on the thumb rest to make sure thumb rest really goes kind of right. I always check that because where their thumb is sitting on that instrument really kind of controls where the fingers are going. So we don't want, it's about 60% of the thumb rest on the skin, 40% on the nail, if you want to think of it that way. And I think it's good to take a couple of minutes to check every kid and where their thumb is. I think it'll save you a lot in the long run. And then we talk about how the oboe, there are 6 main keys, and we talk 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, as far as the fingerings go, and the pinkies. And what we talk about the keys, the right pinky plays these, left pinky. I don't go into what the key names are quite yet, because we don't need to know that in the first lesson. So I strive for, in the first lesson, talk about the embouchure, the breathing, how to put the instrument together, and we then try to learn. I start with middle C on oboe. Okay? Middle C. So 1 and 1. And then we go to B, and then A, and then G. And if they're catching it on really quickly, then we do go to F sharp. That's usually where I stop for the first lesson. Because once you cross F sharp, you start getting into low notes, and we have to talk about what's going on inside of our mouth for that sometimes. So I always start with middle C. And I start from the beginning talking about how, they want to keep their fingers close to the keys. I start that right at the beginning. So they're not playing like this and doing this. And it's tricky. That's probably one of the trickiest things to get them to do is keep their fingers close to the keys.
Yeah.
But I still try.
Now, if they're having a little trouble holding the instrument still, especially like on a C where, they've got their thumb and they've got one finger on each hand. What are your suggestions for students who may be having a little trouble just kind of navigating holding the instrument at first?
That's why I just really recommend checking where their thumb is, because it really is crucial. If it's way too far over like this, their fingers are and they're trying to, that's when you start getting this kind of stuff going on. So it's much more crucial than people think where the thumb is positioned. So I would highly recommend that band teachers really and educators look at this, because it's, not really thought of. I think because if you have too little thumb, first of all, the instrument can fall off and then your fingers are kind of here. Yeah. So, and it's not a perfect system. Sometimes they just have to get used to having the instrument in their hand, and you have to go with what the child is grasping. Some of them it just fits their hands naturally. Some they have to really think about where where their hand is sitting. And, but sometimes if I see somebody struggling, I will start with B. This hand can just hold, practice holding B, and then we'll go to A, and then we'll go to G. And then we'll add this for F sharp. Then we'll go back to C.
I have some students that the side key at the very top, underneath the first finger, they'll end up on the left hand. They'll end up bumping that quite a bit, and I'm like, what kind of language? What do you tell them?
You mean the one?
The one at the top of the instrument.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Usually it's this one they hit.
And and I taught, I'd start to talk to them about like it's always the wrist, right? It's like, I feel like sometimes it's like their wrist is in a funny spot, or, their thumb is hovering funny in the back. And like, how do you describe how to not hit that key?
Well, another thing that'll help them is their left thumb. It should rest on the instrument right below that first octave. So we talk about it, you put that there. And that should help with some balance as well. Sometimes you'll see kids that are doing this. So I was like, just put it right underneath there. And that helps. I've talked to students about creating tunnels, here on these first fingers. So that way they can see light through them if they look down. So it's a little hard to see this way. But so if you're holding your oboe like this, they should be able to see light, like a tunnel. So they're seeing light through here. So that way, there's no way it's on the key. Because if they're resting on the keys, there's no light, or you can't. You could drive a car. Can you drive a car through it? Can you push something through there? Can you see the light? And usually that does it. I don't know if that helps. This is the one I usually see more problems with, the right A flat key, and I'll tell them, pretend like it's hot. Don't touch it. Or if I see them touching, I'll go, it's hot.
I like that.
So, I can do that with a group of 3 or 4. I don't know if I could do that with, I haven't tried it with 5 or 6 yet. So you can try it and see. But yeah, I think the tunnel thing really works. And to be honest, the oboe hands should almost be like piano hands, a bit like this. And they're not perfectly straight. Each finger is kind of a different angle, but they are curved. So hands are actually incredibly crucial on oboe, but we don't go too in depth at the first lesson.
Sure.
It's more the thumb. But
can you talk about the angle of the oboe and the direction of the breath? Because I know right off the bat, kids a lot of times want to play it like really low, like a clarinet. So can you talk a little bit about that?
You mean like posture, or like how the oboe is sitting, or?
Yeah, how far out from the body is it? Sure. Is it straight down? Is it straight out? No. Obviously, I know the answer, but it's neither of those. But
no, it really matters, because I'll talk to my students about the angles of everything. Because a lot of times they play with their chins down. So I always say, pretend like we could put a pencil here. And some might have that play like this. I threaten to put a pencil. Like, I'm going to put a pencil right there if you don't put your chin up. So we talk about chin up, and then it's about a 45-degree angle. It's not 90, and it's not like clarinet. So it's about 45 degree. You could shoot for 45 degree. Everybody's a little bit built differently, so you just have to adjust that sometimes. But you could start with 45 degrees. That could be a good trying to aim for that.
So 45 degrees, but the head is straight ahead.
Head is looking straight ahead. I always say, like you're having a conversation with somebody.
Cool.
Looking them in the eyes.
Yes.
Or trying to put a pencil here like I do sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, just right straight ahead. Okay.
So I saw a question on Erik's list of questions. So we've said all these things, we've done all these things, we practiced all these things, and they're still sounding like ducks sometimes. Why do they sound like a duck? And how do we fix it?
To be honest, when kids start oboe, it's always so loud and it's this or that, and the parents are looking at me like, and I said, I promise you it's supposed to sound like this. It's actually supposed to sound like this. And the reason is, our embouchure is, we're a double reed. We're not a single reed that has some stability with, a reed against a mouthpiece. So we are having to create all of that ourselves. And so these muscles around our embouchure in our face right here are so tiny, and they have to really, really build up strength. So if it's taught properly, it will actually take a little bit of time because they have to build those muscles and where they're sitting and the strength and how to hold that reed. And you don't want it to almost happen so quickly because that means they're clamping and holding on to that reed with their embouchure when it should be more of a cushion. I mean, you do hold on, but it should be thought of more pulling a drawstring or cushioning that reed, not clamping on that reed. So it can take a little bit of time. And, the higher level they get, the more their sound is going to be built into what they're doing inside their mouth. And that's really high level details that, they can be taught once they have an embouchure that's pretty set and their breathing is proper. You might make sure they're using nice reeds, because if they have a good instrument and nice reeds, the younger they are, that helps with the sound, because they are not capable of helping their sound if the reed is a little bit bright or ducky. I don't know if that helps and answers the question.
One thing that I don't think we touched on is how to and how much to wet the reed before they play.
A lot of it depends on the reed style. My reeds are more open reeds. I actually don't need to really wet them at all. You'll just see me kind of lick them, and then they're good to go. But mine are a more open style reed. The emeralds are reeds that need to be soaked, I would say 3 to 5 minutes. If a reed is more on the closed side, then you could soak it even 5 to 7, even to 10 if it's from the middle of winter and it's really closed. Double reed girl, hers, I would say are more closed reed compared to mine. So they usually do need some soaking, but usually about 3 to 5 minutes.
And is that every time, or is that just for kind of the newer reeds?
It can be every time, depending on what the opening of the reed's like.
Okay.
But usually I'll tell my students, before they go to a competition or a performance or whatever, soak them at home and then just put them in the case. And then by the time you get there, they're not getting wet for the first time. So they're a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, that's always one of the things that always, more than any of the other reed instruments, for me with my middle schoolers is like, we've got a 35-minute lesson, and clarinetists can like soak their reed for 60 seconds and be fine, but I got oboists whose reeds are closing up, and who really need to have that time. So I didn't know if you had any tricks, and I like that one of like wetting it at home. Have them do it at home if you can get them to remember to do that. Have them do that at home. You can also, if they have a reed case, I don't have one, but there's a really good reed case on Amazon. It's $15. It's a wooden box. It's covered with silk. It's like that pretty. There's like a blue, green, and remember the other one. One of my students found it years ago, and it's only $15, which is very inexpensive for a reed case. One thing I recommend to my students that all have reed cases, which most of them do, I don't think I have it here, is I put my reed case in a Ziploc bag. So once they have a reed case, they can put it in a Ziploc bag. I don't seal it. It's just in the Ziploc bag. And that kind of helps, especially in the winter time. So it'll it won't let the reeds, get ridiculously dry. And it also won't mold them if you just don't shut it. Yeah, that's great. That's a great tip.
Okay, so that's a tip that, all my students do, most of them. And so even the younger ones are capable of doing that once they have a reed case.
How do you deal with the reed not fitting in the opening, or if it's really tight, especially if it's really tight? What do you recommend?
What I recommend, I don't recommend cork grease, because then it becomes very difficult to get out because then, it's really slippery. So a really good trick, and it's a visual trick, so hopefully people can see, but if you turn the reed the wrong way, you put the cork in your mouth, and you want to go up about halfway, and you do these little tiny bites, and you turn the reed. You don't want to bite too hard because you will crush the tube. A little tiny bite like this, and you're turning the reed, or you can even use your fingernail and do, just put in little indentions all the way around. I would try that first before you do cork.
My students hate that. I'm always like, close your eyes, and
I know, yeah.
I bite on it, and then I'm like, here you go, it works now. And
you bite it for them.
Well, like.
You're like the mama bird.
I am the mama bird.
But I tell them, I'm like, close your
You're
eyes.
brave. I don't put that
magic. I'm like, it is what it is. I'm like, because
you can use your fingernail too. I mean, you can take your, I'm just doing like little with my thumbnail. Just put in like little, indents. Yeah. You can do that too.
Okay.
And then you get little indents. The problem with the cork grease is, then it becomes really slippery, and then it's hard to get out. But you can. I've taught students how to use their T-shirt. I use your T-shirt to kind of put here and turn. I teach them how this hand goes this way and that hand goes that way.
Okay.
And you turn and pull.
That's good.
So, but no, it's tricky. You can break a reed trying to get it out if you're not careful.
I had a question on there about like any like assistive things that you find helpful, like a neck strap or anything that goes on the thumb rest to help students be more
sure
comfortable. Do you recommend or?
I don't recommend neck straps, to be honest, because it puts the oboe at a really weird angle, I think, and then they end up with kind of doing odd things here. But if the oboe comes with nothing here, then yes, I would definitely put something here. You could even put some cork. They make little thumb rests that you can, little like those rubber things that you can stick on. Mm-hmm. As long as they're not moving around too much, you want to make sure they're the ones that fit pretty tight. Because if they're moving a lot, then they're, there's not stability there.
Gotcha. Cool.
But I like putting just some cork there.
Nice.
All right, so we've got like the first lesson down. I love this. I'm assuming taking the instrument apart is kind of like the backwards version of putting it together.
Exactly. I start with the bell. Start with the bell.
Okay.
And again, don't grab in between keys that are hanging off. One little tip that I have used, I'll say really quick for keys, like sometimes I'll have kids come to me and their fingers are sliding off, they're playing the keys like this. I will cut a little piece of Band-Aid and I'll put it on this side of the key so they have something to feel for, or just something like a sticker, or just something that has like a rough, because that's nice too. Sometimes they just need to feel something there. Yes, taking off, and then we take the bell off first. And then I show them how, when they do the middle and the top joint, just to do very little turns and pull up as you're doing the little tiny turns. Because when they do really big turns, that's when they can start ripping that A flat pad. Okay.
Yeah. So a question that I was wondering here. What are some recommendations or recommendation that you have for method books, especially for maybe a new teacher who's coming into a district and has the opportunity to change possibly what they're using, or if they're deciding for the first time what their students should use? What do you recommend?
So for oboe, I recommend, and I don't know how it applies to all the other instruments and what the starting notes in the book are, but I recommend the Standard for Excellence book. Because it starts the oboes with my favorite starting notes, which is the B natural, the A, the G, the C, then it moves to F sharp, then it moves to E. There was another book out there, I can't remember what it's called, that I have seen a couple times from a couple of my students that started at the half hole. It was half hole D to E flat to forked F with your thumb, and that's something you don't want to be starting. That's like learning how to drive a stick shift first.
Yeah.
Your first time to go drive a car. So that book I don't care for, but I can't remember the name of it because I don't have it. But yeah, I don't know how it started the other instruments. Maybe it only started the oboe kind of badly, but it works well for everybody else. I don't know. But The Standard of Excellence by Bruce Pearson is the book I really love.
Also, the method we use in Livingston. Yay, Jen.
Fabulous.
We do it right here.
Good. Do you want to talk about leftover air? Because that is important, because I start that young. Do you want to talk
Sure.
about that?
Absolutely.
Because leftover air. So because we play a lot with mainly pressure, if you don't breathe out, you will start to feel a little strangled because you just keep taking air in, because we don't actually let a lot of air out technically. We're like going back to the water balloon analogy. We are playing with all that pressure. Some air does go out, so that's why we do have to take air in. But I teach my students from the very beginning. When they have to stop to breathe, they breathe out first. Then they breathe back in. So as soon as they stop playing, breathe out first. It might be a little time consuming, but you'll end up with much better situation in the long run with your oboe players. So teach them to breathe out as well.
Yeah, I still do that when I'm playing oboe in a show.
Mm-hmm.
I rarely am able to get rid of all the air that's still in.
Yeah, you have to
your
breathe
lungs.
out.
Yeah.
And then when my students get higher level, we talk about, the reason I start them with that. And even when they're doing their longer exercises, I say, I don't care how long it takes you to do that. Breathe out. We talk about it has to be silent and calm. Breathe out and then breathe back in. Take your time. Because eventually when they become very, very advanced, I'm starting the foundation for them to be able to breathe out and in an eighth rest. Be able to go like that. Or to be able to breathe out, play a couple notes, and even breathe out again, play a couple notes, and then be able to take a good breath in. That's something else we talk about, but not at the beginning level. But you could start at the beginning level, even just having them breathe out as soon as they stop. So, in this Standard of Excellence book, usually there's breath marks like every second, every other, like there's 2 measures, breath mark, and then it goes to 3 and then 4, I think. Mm-hmm. So even at that 2 measure mark in the very beginning, have them breathe out. Start it from the beginning.
Now, as far as resources, on the other end, for teachers who may be nervous about starting beginner oboes, who may not be oboists themselves or possibly not even woodwind players, do you have any resources that you would recommend where they can, for lack of better terms, stay a lesson ahead of the kids? Some ideas where they can turn if they have questions or really want to, get their oboe players going even better?
I would say don't hesitate to reach out to someone like me. We will help you because we will have to be fixing stuff later if we don't. And I have fixed some very odd things. So I would help any band director that emails me or music educator.
That's great.
So I don't know if that's the great answer, but that's what I would recommend.
No, that's great. Speaking of getting in touch, what would be the best way to get in touch with you if one of our listeners had a question? Sure.
Email is usually a good way to email me. My simplest email is just meredythc@hotmail.com. So meredythc@hotmail.com.
We'll put that in the show notes too.
Yes. Yeah. That's the easiest one. But
awesome.
Yes, that's what I recommend is just reaching out to professional oboist. And I've had people reach out to me asking questions, and I happily answer them.
Nice.
Sure.
Jen, did you have any other questions?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, you shed some light on these first lessons for us, and that's
I hope so.
That's so great. Yeah. Because Erik, you're right. There are some teachers that are like, oh, 2 reads, no way. So I think this is going to be really helpful for us. So thank you, Meredyth. Thank you again for coming on and sharing all this with us. I think it's going to help a lot of people get a good start out there for their students. So
thank you for having me. Because, we need young oboists out there. We don't want them afraid of the instrument. You don't have to be afraid of it. It's
Absolutely.
Actually, to be honest, it's actually not a hard instrument if you have the right equipment and you have help.
Yeah. And I think some teachers are also, kind of scared of doing it because maybe they didn't have it in a methods class or, they didn't have a great read when they were learning it for that, half a semester and then moved on to something else. Yeah. So that's great.
And the most important thing is just having the right equipment in the beginning. That's the most important thing.
So to our listeners, if you really enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. You're already listening on something. You might as well just hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you get notified every time that we release a new episode.
We would love to hear from you on social media. Come out there and ask some questions, make your own comments about the oboe and your experience with it. We'd love to hear it. We love it when you come out and interact with us on our social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and of course YouTube. Tune in on YouTube for this one for sure.
And if you really liked it, don't forget to consider becoming a monthly supporter. The link is in the show notes. It's pretty easy to take care of that. If you have questions for me or you'd like to reach out, my name's Erik Donough, and my email address is pretty easy, Erik, E-R-I-K, @Donough, DONOUGH.net.
And I'm Jen Wise, and you can find me at jenwisemusic. That's my email at Gmail, and also on Facebook and Instagram. So.
Awesome. So, Meredyth, we do have a catchphrase at the end of every episode.
Get out there and create some great music.
I like it.
It's oboe.
That's so good.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Meredyth.
Thank you.